This story is taken from chapter 13 of the book Journeying with the Prophets by Serena Yates. This book is available from all leading booksellers and Amazon. Please hit the subscribe button to access all of our videos free of charge. This is the story of Mary and Jesus in Islam. The Mahmud's children have been long awaiting the story of Maryam and baby Isa. The day has finally arrived. The children gathered around Nanny Serena ready to give their summary of the previous day's story. Sienna insisted to have her turn first. Sienna Safayar is the youngest in the Mahmud's household. I really like the stories you told yesterday, Nanny. My favorite was Prophet Dawood using his slingshot to kill the giant Jalut and the large army running away. Leah added. And my favorite was when Talut was searching for his missing donkeys and was chosen by Prophet Shamil to be the king of Israel. And what about you, Kian? Nanny asked the eldest of the Mahmud's clan. I couldn't stop laughing when the evil king died of a heart attack when they lost the battle against the Philistines, said Kian. Eva quietly said that the other children had already talked about her favorites, but she remembered that Talut's army only had 30 men. Nanny Serena was indeed very pleased that the children are enjoying and remembering her stories. The story of Maryam started with her old parents Simran and Hannah. They longed for a child but weren't blessed with any. Hannah was from the descendant of Prophet Dawood. Hannah and her husband prayed to Allah and one day their wish was granted. Hannah was pregnant. She was overjoyed and promised to dedicate her child for the service of Allah. Just before the birth, tragedy struck. Hannah's husband Imran died. When Maryam was born, her mother was very surprised because she was expecting a son. She was now facing a difficult situation. She had vowed that her child will serve Allah, but women were not allowed in the mosque without a guardian, and her father had died. The new mother turned to Zachariah for help. He was married to Hannah's sister Elizabeth. The Quran tells us that this family was from the house of Imran. The suggestion was that a guardian will be appointed for Maryam to remain in the temple of Baitul Maqdis. This is now known as Masjid Aqsa. Who was Maryam's guardian at the temple? Kian asked. Nanny Serena answered that question by telling an interesting event. Many holy men wanted to be Maryam's guardian because her father Imran was such a pious, respected person. So, a competition was held. They all wrote their names on pens and threw in the river. They had decided that the one that remained afloat will be selected. Zachariah's pen did not sink. Zachariah was the chosen one. He was selected to take care of young Maryam. He was very happy because he didn't have any children of his own. When Maryam was old enough, she went to live at Masjid Aqsa, dedicating her life to the services of Allah. Her uncle Zachariah, who was a carpenter, built a separate room for her in the temple. Zachariah visited Maryam every day and taught her about Allah. One day during one of his visits he saw out-of-season fruits in her room. When he inquired where they came from, Maryam said it was Allah who sent them to her. He was so surprised. Some of the Bani Israel were becoming bad, not following Allah's laws. Zachariah prayed to Allah for a son to guide these people. His wish was fulfilled when a few days later his old wife became pregnant. 6 months after that, a man appeared in front of Maryam. He was an angel. He came to give her some very surprising news. What was the news? Asked Leah. When Nanny told her that Allah sent the angel to tell Maryam that she will give birth to a son, Leah was very puzzled. But she is not married and she is a pious girl, how can that be? Inquired the child. Nanny Serena continued the story by telling the children that Maryam also asked those questions and the angel reassured her it was by the will of Allah. Allah can do all things. She reminded them that Prophet Adam and his wife were created without a mother or a father. The angel told her that he will be a prophet and she must name him Isa, and he will speak from the cradle. He will be a prophet for the Bani Israel and will perform many miracles. When it was time for Maryam to give birth, she left Jerusalem and traveled towards the city of Bethlehem. It was a quiet area, so no one will question her as to why she was having a child without a father. The birth of Prophet Isa, Jesus. May peace and blessings of Allah be upon him. Miriam had a normal pregnancy. The time has now come for the birth of the baby. Allah guided her to a safe place. She sat on the trunk of a palm tree. Near to it was a running stream. It was here she went into labor. Her pains were excruciating. Baby Asa made his entry into the world. After the birth, Miriam was very hungry and thirsty. Allah inspired her to shake the date tree and eat the fruits and drink the water from the running stream. He was a beautiful baby. But now Miriam has this dilemma to face. How will she explain his birth to the Bani Israel? Allah sent an angel to tell her not to worry. Miriam had full faith in Allah, and took her baby to face the Bani Israel. The people saw Miriam with her baby and started questioning her. What were they saying to her? Eva wanted to know. Nanny Serena replied by telling the children some of the questions she was asked. What have you done? You are from a good family, and your parents were pious. How could you have a baby without a husband? As Allah had directed her not to speak, she just pointed to her baby. Then a miracle happened. The newborn baby began speaking. He said that he was the servant of Allah and a prophet. He told them that Allah sent him to guide the Bani Israel to the right path. The people were dumbfounded listening to the words of this newborn baby. Some were convinced there and then that Miriam was indeed a very pious girl and the baby was a miracle from Allah. But even after witnessing such a miracle there was others who believed that it was a trick that the baby spoke. As Prophet Asa grew, his unique qualities and prophecies began to increase. When Prophet Asa was 12 years old, something very interesting happened. Him and his mother were passing by a temple. There were many men entering the temple. The prophet decided to wander in with them, leaving his mother outside. He found himself in a room full of people listening to a lecture given by a priest. The prophet was very brave and stood up and started questioning him. The priest did not know the answers and Prophet Asa continued asking questions. Yet no one knew the answers. Prophet Asa spent a long time in the temple and his mother went home with the belief that her son must have returned. When Miriam realized that the young prophet was not at home, she quickly ran back to the city to look for him. She found him in the temple sitting amongst the priests still debating. As the prophet grew older, he began to study the Torah and follow the rules of the book strictly. Nanny reminded the children that Allah gave Prophet Musa the Torah. His knowledge took him to the realization how the Bani Israel had misinterpreted and abused the words of Allah for their own benefits. Prophet Asa's mission was to confirm the Torah, to make lawful things that were previously unlawful and to reaffirm the belief in one God. Those priests were choosing their own law, making things lawful and unlawful as they wished. They had violated the Sabbath laws. They ruled that the sick must not seek medical attention on the Sabbath day, there should be not eating nor drinking, and people must not even plait their hairs. They made up so much different rules that contradicted the Torah. Prophet Asa broke all their rules when he fed the hungry people, made fires for the elderly to keep themselves warm, tend to the sick. Prophet Asa was certainly not popular with the so-called higher priests in Israel. The prophet had profound knowledge of the Torah and was living by all its rules. Allah also blessed the prophet with signs and miracles. Prophet Asa was provided with all the qualities from the one true God to guide and influence the Bani Israel. One day Prophet Asa visited the temple and found more than 20,000 priests. They all earn a living from the temple. There were more priests than visitors. They charged the visitors lots of money to visit the temple. If the poor people had no money, they will be turned away. This day the prophet saw a huge flock of sheep waiting to be sold to the visitors for sacrifice. If the people want to bring their own animal to make their sacrifice, the priest will not allow it. It was indeed not a very good time for the poor people. It seemed that rather than worshipping Allah, the priests were worshipping money. The temple rather than a place of worship was more of a market and trading place. The Bani Israel were indeed corrupted. The temple was full of offerings whilst thousands living on the outside were starving. Nanny Serena noticed that Kian was in such deep concentration. Nanny asked him to share his thoughts. "I was wondering what happened to the son of that pious man Zachariah. He would be an adult by now?" queried Nanny's oldest grandchild. "Wow, KN, thank you for listening so intently," said Nanny Serena. Nanny informed the children that Prophet Zachariah's wife Elizabeth gave birth to a beautiful baby boy. The prophet was 90 years old when his son was born. His name was Yahya, John in English. Yahya was no ordinary son. Allah granted him knowledge and wisdom. He was full of sympathy and compassion. He had full knowledge of the Torah and followed all the rules of Allah. He was righteous and free from sin. Allah blessed Yahya with prophethood. He guided the people to follow the commands of Allah and refrained from committing sins. Him and his cousin Prophet Asa lived in Israel at the same time, calling people to Islam.